Alright, in this video I just want to talk about boat wiring and how this boat is wired. I did a video while I was actually in my boat, but I feel like it might be a little bit hard to follow. So I want to do one with some screenshots because this might be easier to follow. So here's a picture at the dash on how everything is. Let me just explain this. Let's start from the battery. So the battery is basically under in this storage compartment right here. I actually do not have the flip up seats, but yeah, you can see the battery right there. And I actually have the Rebel XS. Now from there you take two main wires, right, positive and negative. You can run anything as little as say 10 gauge up to, I actually ran 6 gauge. Basically you go up this little, there's a boot that you go up, you unscrew that cap, pull the wire, and you go around the side to there. So you get both your positive and negative feeds run to the dash. Okay? Now, and actually I've actually found on my boat actually it's easier to run it the other way. It's actually easier to fish it through this direction and tape it to like a fishing rod, poke it through, and then go that direction. But anyway, okay, so then we get to the console of the boat. So you take your positive, so this is the axis panel, the fuse block. So you take your positive lead, actually take your positive lead and run it through the battery switch, and then from the battery switch you go to the fuse block. The negative just goes straight from the battery to there. Okay, so this shuts it on and off. Now why did I choose black? Well, it just matches the dash. But this shuts off the positive feed when you turn this 90 degrees, and then actually it turns it on when you go 90 degrees and turns it off when it's in this position right here. Now the back of the battery switch just looks like this. It just has a little pass-through. So I believe this goes to the battery, that goes to the fuse block, or vice versa. I'm not sure which. On mine it actually told me, the one that I purchased. But yeah, you basically just crimp, some ring terminals on. This takes the these take pretty large ring terminals. So these take the full, like 5/8, I believe. So yeah, you need some pretty big ring terminals. And then for this, they take size 10 ring terminals. So I actually bought some size 10 ring terminals for 6 gauge wire. And again, you can use 10 gauge. Most people could probably get away with 10 gauge or 8 gauge, but I use 6 gauge. Okay, so now this simply just runs down here and connects to this axis panel. There's a positive and negative for that on the side. There's 6 on one side, 6 on the other, both for positive and negative. And so what you do is you buy those ring terminals that have built-in heat shrink, and they're number 8 that you use. Number 8. And they're for, I believe, 18 to 22 gauge wire. You're going to use the real thin stuff. So basically, yeah, so when I turn this on and off, it shuts off this. It shuts off this Ethernet switch. You can see down here, you can see the top of it. Now, this Ethernet switch doesn't have an on-off switch. And I also have a Minn Kota heading sensor in the front of the boat. So when you go to turn this, it shuts this off, my front bow-mounted trolling motor, that Bluetooth heading sensor, and this all off. There's no reason why I need all these other switches right here, because I don't have a bilge pump, I don't have a live well, I don't have other things. This has its own on-off button. So does the bow mount trolling motor, and that heading sensor take up very minimal power when I'm actually using it. So all I want is one switch that turns this whole system off. I don't need, even if I added a radio has got its own on-off button. So yeah, so basically, so that's a much simpler way of wiring than adding another one of these rocker switches. Now some of you might be asking, why didn't I tie all this to the switch panel? Well, you open this up, I found a negative bus bar, but there was no extra connections to wire into the positive. So I could have actually used the negative bus bar for this, but you know, I ran a one that has positive and negative, just a separate connection, and that may make sure everything's fused properly as well. Okay, so and it makes sure it doesn't overload my negative ground. Okay, so there's one other thing that I want to mention: the pull string. So now, if you open up this compartment right here, under here, you'll see some pull string. And if you open up this big cap, you can see this big circle cap. There's the motor cables are covering it up. But you turn that about 2 or 3 times, you'll see the other end of the pull string. Now, I would highly recommend watch the video in this playlist, or if you're not watching this video in a playlist, I'll link to it below. But there's a great video on how to pull wires through conduit. I would strongly recommend that you watch that, because you will lose your pull string if you do not do this properly, pulling that through from here back to here. And then if you wanted to, say if you had your Minn Kota, fish finder or whatever, if you wanted to wire that to your access panel, then you would just loop it back around this way, back to there. And that's how you would run that. The other way you can actually do it is run along the side of the boat. There's actually a gap between here and the wall. You can run the cables this way, and you can even glue it under the gunnel or run it through the seam down here and get it to your access panels. So there's that way as well. So anyway, I hope that helps. And like I said, there's other good boat videos. There's other good videos on how to do cabling and everything. So this just helps you get the general idea on how everything's hooked up and everything, and how the cables are ran and everything.